Hey everybody, I'm Catalina, and today we're here to talk about episode 11 of Failure Frame. Today's episode totally showed us a full spectrum of human emotions and motivations, and we definitely have a lot to discuss. Let's begin with Eve and her reaction to what happened at the end of last episode, where it turns out that it was her killing blow that provoked the creature they were fighting into actually giving a bellow, which called out to all sorts of other creatures in the area, alerting them to the fact that this thing had been killed. Could Eve have known that in advance? Absolutely not. Is Eve responsible solely? Absolutely not. And yet, because of Eve's own history and her own convictions, she initially felt that she was. And when we saw her at the start of the episode, it was very clear that she was consciously determining that she was going to sacrifice herself. And I mean, considering the kind of life that Eve has led and everything, and the kind of person that Eve is, it makes sense that she would have this kind of struggle and reach these kinds of conclusions, because as a gladiator, consciously or not, she's been being trained to throw her life away at a moment's notice over a whole bunch of different reasonings and rationales. So when she views it as it being her mistake that has put the group in danger, it stands to reason that she would decide that it's her responsibility to do that. Furthermore, of course, she wants to protect Lisbeth, and while on one hand, I mean, she could potentially do that in making this decision, on the other hand, this kind of reminds me of the character Yusuke from Yu Yu Hakusho, when he is willing to trade his life to save another character's mother, even though it would ultimately mean that he died and his own mother would feel grief. He doesn't think it through, he's acting on impulse. And while Eve trying to do something to prevent the dangers to everyone else would be valuable, she's not thinking about the emotional impact that it would have on Lisbeth or even on Toka or Ceres. She doesn't value herself highly enough for that to actually be a consideration. She's probably still largely, whether she realizes it or not, acting in survival mode. Fortunately for Eve and Lisbeth, Toka is very aware of the psychology of the people around him and has dealt with a lot of psychological bullshit of his own, obviously. So he can see through this and he gets what's going on. And while it's not that he in any way feels that Eve isn't a capable fighter who could defend herself, who could make a difference, who could be useful, he's also fully aware of the fact that she is acting likely in a self-destructive way, and of the reality that he is actually the better candidate to deal with the situation, given what it is and given what the abilities of him and the rest of his party actually are. And so it is with that in mind that he tells everyone that he is going to do this, and to ensure that the other three don't try to interject, because he knows that they aren't going to be happy about him going out and risking himself for a variety of reasons. He makes it an actual conscious order. And that is how we actually end up seeing him and Piggymaru and I think it's Slay go out and actually deal with the situation. And I overall really enjoyed the combat sequences that we got with the three of them together. It was really cool seeing how much Toka has actually advanced and seeing him deal not merely with a handful of enemies, but literally with an entire battlefield of opponents, utilizing gaming aspects such as the fact that his mana returns if he levels up as conscious deciding factors in how he's going to face the opponents that he's dealing with and actually fight them and win. That was really clever and interesting, and I found it really cool to see how, despite the fact that he keeps telling himself that he's only in this for revenge, that he doesn't care about other people, that he's this, that he's that the way that he behaves and the decisions he makes and the way that he thinks shows us that even if he consciously actually believes those things, and even if there is at least a part of them that is actually kind of true, that there are other aspects to his character, and it is that balance between the central revenge theme and those other aspects of his character that continue to make him unique and compelling, and that continue to make me interested in following his story. We then shift our attention to the students who are actually part of the central group that came to this world along with Toka, and what's going on with them, because they are here in the land of summoned monsters or whatever as well. And they are dealing with hordes of enemies of their own. And we are seeing a variety of different aspects of how they are dealing with them and behaving, and how this crisis situation is bringing out aspects of their own personalities. Now, I'm not as good at remembering the names of these guys because they kind of come and go like the wind, but the mage, who was a loser and who ended up being an A rank, kind of the opposite to what happens to Toka, actually shows how much of a freaking psychopath that he actually is, in the reality that not only does he turn and flee and run from the enemy rather than using his powers to help others, but he actually relishes in and rejoices over the fact that people died because he feels that he is better than them. And that's absolutely crazy. Not only that, but when he's talking to the S-rank girl, who's actually been relatively kind and decent to people overall, he actually tries to imply that she thinks she's better than him and that he is a victim because she actually calls him out on his shit, which he very much deserves to be called out on. Because I'm sorry, dude, but even in a combat situation, if you continue to throw away your cannon fodder, as you would kindly call them, eventually, do you know what that means, dum-dum? It means you're going to have to fight or you're gonna be din-din. So even if you don't like those people, making sure that you actually continue to propagate their survival is absolutely crucial. On top of that, we have a very interesting conflict with him and the super S-rank guy who basically thinks he's God, and that guy telling this little piece of trash that he is still nothing despite the fact that he has obtained powers. And to an extent, this guy is correct, because the measure of a person, especially when they obtain more capability or power, or when they are in a crisis situation where they can help people, is not about their own personal capability. It's about what they do with that capability. And if somebody becomes successful in anything, and the best that they can do is rejoice in the failure and suffering of others, then they really haven't gained anything of true value. Now, this guy who is giving this lesson to this mage is still an absolute piece of shit. So I'm not going to swing him too much leeway here or anything. He has his own kettle of fish to fry. But he is correct in what he is saying with regard to that. The fact that this little ass was sitting there and basically gloating over the fact that people died really ticked me off, because this is the kind of thing that makes it really look bad when people are being oppressed in some way, and then something happens to change the course of their luck, and then there will be a sub-fragmentation of those people who will, instead of rejoicing in their new capability, instead try to continue to play a victim card or even try to get revenge. It's really sad because, I mean, in reality, and I've said this about this show a billion times, and it's interesting that we're seeing it here in this angle and context, but the best revenge over anything that happens to you, regardless of who did it or what happened or anything else, or whether it was just a case of circumstance, which is more so what I'm seeing here, is of course your own happiness and your own success. It's not taking down other people. So yeah, that part kind of irked me, but it's interesting to see how they actually addressed it. And it's interesting to see something like that be addressed, because that's the kind of thing that often likes to get swept under the rug. While we're on this tangent and going down this particular rabbit hole, let's touch on the reality of the dangers and damages of things like class systems, caste systems, victim blaming, or any number of other things that can go on, because there is a lot of that in this story, and it is a repetitive theme. It can be really damaging to have a hierarchy that people can't actually organically move through, and that is utilized to hold people down rather than to create structures and organization to get results and resolve. We see a clear parallel of this in the class and caste systems used by the goddess and the students, and everything I just talked about a minute ago, in comparison to the organizational systems being utilized by Toka and Saras and the rest of their group, which aren't used to hold anyone down or to belittle anyone, but rather to be utilized only in situations where there is a split-second decision that needs to be made, with the need for some form of hierarchy or accountability that it can be relied on to get that done. So that's something I did want to point out because it was something I noticed and that I thought was quite interesting. Lastly, of course, we need to touch on the concept of the most good of intentions inadvertently leading to bad results, because we definitely see a sample of that here with regard to that little girl who runs off on her own, who is terrified, who is panicked in the middle of the fight, and then Eve comes across her when she decides to go out because she's concerned about Toka, and she's discussed it with Saras and everything. And then one of the warriors that was looking for the smaller girl actually comes across the two of them as they are first meeting and instantly strikes, instantly blocks Eve's ability to speak, and then, as far as we know, potentially lands a either serious or lethal strike. We will see what happens as the story continues, because in the rules of writing, unless we actually see Eve fall, she's not dead, but there is every possibility that something very serious has happened here. And there are a variety of reasons that this could be. These people are in the middle of a panic situation. These people have likely been taught that anything that is not of their own group is to be destroyed. These people will have probably never seen any kind of creature that has any anthropomorphic behaviors like Eve does, so they probably think it's part of the Demon Lord's army anyway. And this girl is coming in and seeing the other girl and Eve in a conversation and situation where there hadn't been an actual establishment of any kind of confidence or trust. So it looked like Eve was going to attack the little girl, and the result and the action was probably very instantaneous. It's actually really a shame because obviously Eve is a nice person, and we actually see Eve imprinting Lisbeth's face onto the little girl, meaning we know for a fact that Eve had no intention of harming her. So it really is tragic that so much can be lost simply by having the inability or unwillingness to actually have conversation and make sure you know what's going on before you take action. Anyway, overall I thought this was a pretty good episode. I thought it was quite interesting. I definitely thought there was a lot going on with the overall story and pacing, and I really enjoyed it. But those are just my thoughts. I'd love to know what you guys are thinking, so drop a comment below and let me know, and I'll talk to you in the next video. See you later. Bye!